I can't remember her name, but it's his.
I'll make sure.
It would be, he had hired an assistant to be able to keep up with all the work that he's done.
Oh, sure.
He's
Ready to go,
been
guys?
Now for about 4 or 5 months. She's
Ready to go, Bill?
Okay.
Okay, Chris or Casey, you ready? Ready to roll? Okay.
wow. We are rocking and rolling.
All righty. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, folks in the room, as well as those that might be bothering to tune in on cable. Time to get started with the Moorhead Public Service meeting of today is what, November 14th, 2017. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
Move to approve the agenda?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Similarly, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Got a motion? Second? Anybody wanting to change it?
Second.
Okay, doesn't sound like it. Okay. Got a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All righty, moving on right down to customers to be heard. In this portion of the meeting, we do offer folks from the general public and customers to be heard, and I do understand that we have someone that would like to address us this evening about a situation that she's concerned about and that we ought to pay some attention to. So if I may, if you would come forward. Yeah, if you would come forward and let us know who you are. And,
I'm Mary Nelson.
You might offer an address, too.
Yes,
so
I live at 622 Cedar Lane, awesome neighborhood over by the high school. I love
deal.
it.
Good deal. Good to have you with us.
I'm here to talk about a sewer problem that we had, that the Key Contracting had to dig up the street and replace some of the sewer that had been put in at the time that they had to do a new one on our street. And we had issues way before this ever collapsing of this happened, because there's 5 girls in our family. We have a big family, and this is kind of gross, but I have to say it. During the holidays or anytime we all got together, it would be the standing joke of, nobody better go number 2 here, because we are going to have to plunge the toilet all the time. I mean, and it was constant, because it wouldn't go down into the, it wouldn't do it. It would just back up, and it was horrible. And Mom and Dad had to, they're passed now, deceased. I'm living there with my sister who's handicapped. And they would have to rotor like 2 or 3 times a year. Granted, there's tree roots and all that, but we've had issues with their sewer. I mean, it was years and years of this, not being able to, the toilets wouldn't flush right, and it would back up, and just a lot of that issues. And so, so when we finally now had this A1 sewer come, they could not get through with their line. In fact, they almost broke it because it couldn't get in through there. And they took a picture, and here it had that out in the street where that elbow thing had come, it had collapsed. And I have pictures that they took, the Key Contracting, when they dug down into there, and to show. And so they just said that, I can't rotor, I can't do any of that stuff, because it's not going to matter, because you can't get into the street to clear the line. And prior to that, we had other people coming in too, and they were always having a problem, always. But this last time, they just couldn't. I mean, it just evidently had just gotten to the point where it had totally collapsed. And of course, we don't know any different, because you go to the bathroom and you shouldn't have to plunge every time either. I'm just kind of us gross, but it was a standing joke. I mean, it was just how it was. And we kept saying to Mom and Dad, something's not right. But, they're older, and I don't know. And so I'm here to kind of hope that you guys see that this has been an issue not just in the last 5 years, it's been ongoing. And obviously, hopefully, that this collapsing has been and the roots were growing out of it, so we have had a lot of problems. And my dad always taught us to be honest and fight for what you believe in, and I just hope that you guys see it and do the right thing. And I have lived in Moorhead pretty much my whole life, and I'm proud of that, and I hope to stay proud of that. So I hope that you can see my point, and we'll see. But I thank you for this opportunity to talk to you about this.
Thank you for
Yep.
for joining us tonight, too.
Do you have any
know,
questions?
Yeah, and I'm sure that we're going to have many.
Yeah.
And I don't think we're going to resolve anything
Right,
tonight.
right,
You know, we chatted a little bit before the
Right.
meeting, and
Yep.
I think the important thing is that we're going to open a conversation tonight
Right.
about your situation.
Yeah.
The context of time here is, as you suggested, a lot of years. And-
Right.
And I think what we're going to need to do is really start to understand this from a ways back, when there was unfortunately, a break that we were involved with as a utility some years ago.
Right.
And then it's a repair that had been made and so forth.
Right.
And so understanding that and now understanding the plight that you've had actually over some time, we're going to ask Bill and his staff to get us up to date on what it is that we have done over those years, as well as then, you know, what it is that we probably ought to be talking about as a remedy. And so, and I'm sure that others have questions. And
Sure.
we're going to generate some questions based on what it is our staff tells us.
Sure.
So if
Yep.
anyone else cares to ask a particular question, John,
Yep.
go ahead.
Just a clarification, Bill or staff, is the sewer public service or is it city?
Well, and I could ask Chris to get up and talk a little bit more about what we did there as far as repair that
Okay.
could have affected the sewer line. That's probably the question, because there's a sewer line and then there's
Speak, Mike.
There's a sewer line, and then we did a water main replacement in that area. And after, I believe it was 14 years, you know, it's very possible that the ground shifted and there were issues with that.
So with that, then it would be something that we should be looking at addressing then.
Well, and we have. I mean, it's gone through quite a process already because it's been to our insurance company. It's been through the city, and I guess I was going to ask too, because your bill was quite high. I mean, how much did it cost to fix the?
6,000.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the issue. Is it, you know, as we know, it costs a lot of money to dig up the street and make repairs of that nature.
But it's still an issue. Correct,
Yeah,
Mary?
it is. And like I said, we've lived here our whole life, and I just thought that, you know, we needed to address this, and I wanted to be heard, and I hope you understand my plight.
Yeah.
And I know that there are going to be questions, and
Sure.
and explanations are going to generate more questions. And, you know, in the interest of being somewhat efficient with this, I'd like to get kind of the details together all at once, as opposed to hearing a little bit now and then maybe a little bit over the next several days or the next couple of weeks. If we could be prepared to be briefed on the details between now and the next meeting, then you know, I think we can have a constructive conversation about this.
I agree.
Because right now, we're really just operating on what little bit we've just gotten in a presentation. I've chatted a little bit with Bill about it ahead of time, but I think there's a lot for us to understand here so that we can really provide an appropriate response. So if we have other questions, you know, right now for
Right,
our
and I know
customer,
that Tom
that's-
Paschke would be happy to talk to you also.
Yeah.
And I have his cell phone number that he could not be here. He is in the cities right now, but he would have came. So he can maybe have a little bit more insight of what they were down in there, took pictures, like I said, I have. And so I don't know if you want to call him and talk to him. He's more than happy to do that also.
Well, I'd like to make sure that we have your contact information too, so
Yep.
that we
Oh,
can-
yeah,
can
definitely.
call and-
I'm not going anywhere.
Good deal, but
Yeah.
I think even though there is a good deal of time involved here, I think we need to ask a lot of questions. As you've already said, it isn't as if
Right.
you had a problem that popped up here a couple of years ago.
Right, it's been ongoing for
It's been
years.
ongoing.
Yes.
And so
Yes.
we really do have to do
Right.
our homework here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and so,
Yeah, Chuck.
Thanks. And I appreciate if you get the city involved too.
Yeah.
Council people and city staff.
Absolutely.
Wow. This is getting to be,
Well, and we have a member of our city council who's is
Yep.
here, and she has taken some interest in
No,
this,
that's
and
fine.
we've chatted about it.
Yep.
So you have our attention.
good. That's
You have our
okay.
attention.
I guess. Like I said, this was on my bucket list, but now I guess I can cross it off if I ever have a bucket list.
Thank you.
Anything from
Yes.
other members while we have?
I think the plan is a good one.
Okay.
Get the history, and that way we can address it fully.
Okay.
Yep.
Good. Thanks.
I
Chris.
appreciate your time, and I thank you for this opportunity.
You bet.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
All
doing
right, yep, you're welcome.
it. Okay.
Could I have a request?
John, go ahead.
Mary, could you be sure to attend next meeting as well?
Okay,
Good.
I'll be here for
Okay,
sure.
thank you.
Yep,
Next meeting will be the 5th.
The next meeting will be December 5th.
okay.
Okay.
And it will be at the Heritage Jump Comps Center.
fun.
So, yeah,
Good, I
so,
like that place.
yeah, so,
Okay, I will do that. I will be there. I'll probably bring my sister too, that have lived
Okay.
here also.
That's a big night for us that night. Plus, it's my wife's birthday, so I have to be out of here.
yeah.
Yeah, because it's an important one, so. All birthdays are important, so.
You are going to be in trouble.
I'll be in trouble. Yeah, I will be, so. All right, any other customers? Need to be sure to give everyone the opportunity. Evidently not, okay. Old business, any old business to attend to, Bill or members?
No? Not that I
John?
have.
Yep. Last meeting, we had a customer come in and made some requests by some information as far as some training or options, or Bruce had asked for clarification on how the usage charge is done. Have we made any progress, or is that still on yet to come?
Say that again on the.
Bruce Beckwith?
Yeah.
Here, when he was here, he
Oh,
explained.
on
he would-
training?
some
Yeah, I
training.
mean, we don't have any, we've talked about it, but I don't have any specific training. We've talked about how we're going to do that. I mean, I talked with the Missouri River Energy Services staff because, it's something that all utilities deal with, trying to figure out how to tell their customers how to deal with demand charges.
Okay.
So, but yeah, it'll,
Could we have like a target date to shoot for to have that being completed? Or is that a
the
little
actual
ambitious?
the actual training, do you
Of
think,
the-
or?
Of what our plan would be?
Yeah, early next year. How about January or February?
That sounds
We don't
good.
want to do
No,
December.
That's good, as long as we got a time frame that we know we're going to shoot for. And I understand it's probably a moving target, but I think it's good to have something for it.
Yeah,
Yep. Okay.
yeah, and any thoughts you might have on that would be good, because that is a particularly difficult one, because, I mean, we've dealt with, like when we change our demand rates, we did that a couple of years ago, and that's when we seem to train everybody, is when we change those rates, because then all of a sudden they see there's an issue there.
My thought, Bill, as far as we would have to give a good explanation of what it is, and then examples of what impacts it, as far as, in his case, he had said he put on an extra air conditioner, which impacted him. So that, and then also, I think Dennis had been a resource for them, so talk about what we can do or provide information to the people. And then the contact information, I think, would be appropriate to have, whoever that may be. Here's
Yep.
just a couple ideas off the top of my head here for it, because,
Yep.
and it's got to be available online or sent out annually or whatever. When we send our billing information, is just some quick thoughts.
Yep, okay, thank you.
And I got a question for you also here. I thought I'd just wait for in the old business, but in the bills, we had, and I just need to know what these, I think I know what they are, but there was a payment for a 750 15 kV PRI for $62,000. And there was I think a 715 kV PRI for $31,000. Is that transformers, or Joe, you want to kind of share what that would be, or Travis, or whoever?
Sounds like primary wire? Primary, yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's what it is. I'm just curious. And I'm assuming since if it's different capability of voltage or
Yeah, if it's
Age?
750 MCM wire, then it's for the 2021st Street underpass grade separation project that we're doing, so.
All right. Thank you.
Who says we don't get into the details?
It was a big number.
Oh, those are big numbers, but now we know exactly what they're for, too. Anything else? Old business? Okay. Then moving on to reports. Chuck, you're here for the city council this time.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Dave. Not much to report. Yesterday, we did pass, though, a resolution to agreement for consulting services relating to the acquisition of new financial, payroll, and human resources software. And it's long overdue. I think our current system's 14 years old, and in software life cycle, 2 years is old. So we entered into that agreement, and that should take care of a lot of it. That should save some time and a lot of money for the city. And maybe even some collaboration with the MPS.
Okay.
So we were looking at that, and we did. So, and the company that we did choose was Soft Resources, which I know they're really thorough and they're really a good company. So,
Okay.
but yeah, that system we have right now is pretty old.
Bill, is that something that we're able to sit down, take a look at as far as something that is collaborative between the?
Without getting into too much detail, I mean, we operate our financial systems, with more of theirs is more of a city focus, ours is more a business type focus. We do FERC accounting, which is more of a business type arrangement. And so we simply use Great Plains software, and it actually works pretty well for us. Mm-hmm. So we don't need as involved of system as they do. But we'll be watching, see how theirs operates, and see if there's any way we can collaborate. But as of right now, our needs are met right now. So, but it doesn't mean that we can't look at something in the future.
Yeah.
And it's always
step.
you can keep it open,
Yeah.
Get to be open to opportunities. And, yeah.
Yep.
Just looking for any ways to cut costs. So
Yep.
Okay.
that's all I have.
That's it. Public Service Commission. Any updates, reports, activities, fun, excitement? Yeah, okay, good deal. That brings us to our general manager, Bill. You have the floor.
Yeah, just other than what's on the agenda, I don't have anything, or in the general manager's report, I don't have anything additional.
Okay. Well, then, that brings us down to item number 9, to approve the APPA deed grant for Community Geothermal System Pilot Project and concept of Capture the Earth Renewable Energy Program. This is something that is pretty exciting for Moorhead, for the community, for really a lot of things as we look to the future. So we're anxious to visit about this. Been a lot of meetings the last couple of weeks, couple of months, I guess. And,
Yep. And Dennis and I will provide an update. I want to give full disclosure right off the bat, and I'm sure you saw on the agenda. One of my sons is a consultant, and he wrote the grant, and he also would be working on this project. So I want to make sure that you're comfortable with that. Chair Dave and I talked about it a bit, and we want to make sure we provide full disclosure. And it's something that I'm a little uncomfortable about, and I want to make sure that you're comfortable with it. My son said if he needs to back away from the project, he certainly would do that. But he's the one who has helped get us to this point, and then would help us in the future. So just want to do full disclosure. So.
Well, Bill, I think we need to understand, that there is a complete separation, that you in particular are not in a position to benefit directly from anything that your son is doing, but also kind of in the reverse. There really needs to be that separation. And so as we do step forward with this one, as questions may occur, I think we just need to be completely transparent about that.
Yep.
You have stated that there isn't a co-benefit or anything like that, but let's keep that in mind as well as we move forward.
Right.
It is an exciting project, but the surname Schwant is
Prominent in
is
there.
prominent in this, and so between Brian and Bill, I just think we need to have that understanding.
Right.
And so let's move forward, but let's move forward with full disclosure and caution,
Yep.
because we don't want to get into a situation where we have any problems occur. So with that understanding, is
Yeah.
the board ready to move forward? Okay.
Discussion.
For discussion?
Well, or you probably want a presentation. Dennis has a
Yeah.
PowerPoint, and then we can kind of talk through what we need as far as our recommended action for tonight.
Okay. Well, let's hear from Dennis, and then we'll get into discussion of the project. So Dennis, you have it.
Good evening. My name is Dennis Eisenbrown. I'm the Energy Services Manager. Today's conversation is about a new program and project called Capture the Earth that uses geothermal heat pump technology. Before we proceed with the presentation, I'd like to ask you to imagine for a moment a hot summer day. You're standing by your window air conditioner, sipping your iced tea and lemonade, feeling the cool breeze. And then a few minutes later, you're out mowing the lawn and you're back on the back side of that air conditioner, and it's blowing out hot air. You're going, there's a deal. So what you have there is an air conditioner. Now, if you could magically turn that around or do it automatically, you would have a heat pump. You're either moving heat from hot to cold or from cold to hot. And be able to do that on the fly is what a heat pump is. Nothing more than that. And the geothermal part is where we use the stable temperature of the earth as either a heat source or as a heat sink. And we're simply connecting pipes to this heat pump to transfer heat in and out of the earth. That's all geothermal technology is. So with that, we will proceed. These are the highlights of the program that we are addressing and asking you to consider. Mr. Schwant's son, Brian Schwant, is the principal of a company called Free Engineering Services. And he basically has worked with us to put together this proposal to have a geothermal heat pump technology that we could possibly use in the city for heating and cooling buildings. We're looking at doing it as possibly as a district heating system. There's a lot of potential here, and we're in the exploratory phases and see what's practical and what isn't. The American Public Power Association is very interested in this project, so much that they have tentatively awarded us a grant for $125,000. That we will accept with your acceptance. If not, we will say thank you and move on. Nothing lost. But typically their grants are not that high, so for them to grant us a $125,000 grant for this project means that they are very interested in what we do. We're looking to not only actually implement a system somewhere, but to also collect data to see how it works on our system. Basically, there's a lot of data measurement here that can be used by a lot of utilities, so it's a good project here. We've had similar projects called Capture the Wind back in the late 1990s. That was a community-type project. Then we had Capture the Sun, which is a more recent project having to do with solar technology. And so now we're expanding that now to Capture the Earth, and maybe eventually we'll get to Capture the Universe or something, but for now we're going to stop at Capture the Earth, I think. So one of the projects that we're looking at doing initially is the new 8th and Main building where they're starting a new construction. Our good folks at Eventide are going to be one of the anchor tenants in that building, and we met with them this morning. They are excited about this possibility, and they also let us know that the place actually has a real name now, and now for public consumption, that building is called Block E, as in Edward, Block E. Comes from something in the cities, but... Or Eventide, there you go. I should have thought of that, so thank you. But, so Block E is, if you hear that now, or you're in the news or whatever, that's the building they're referring to. Besides the American Public Power Association being excited with this project, there's also support from our power supplier, Missouri River Energy Services. They're very, very interested in this project. Ultimately, what we're looking at, one of the reasons that they are so interested in is in a concept, what we call efficient electrification. And what that means is that in the 70s, power growth was growing steadily at about 3%. People were building new power plants. We just kept growing. But now we've actually have done such a good job, or not we, but technology companies and whatever, with LED light bulbs, more efficient air conditioning equipment, whatever, you know, the power use has actually started to level off and going flat. And so if we could somehow increase that without increasing people's overall energy bill, this is known as efficient electrification. So maybe we're going to redirect heating and cooling from a fossil fuel source to this geofuel source, which is not really a fuel, but it's just the heat source and the heat sink. But we're using electricity then to pump a fluid in the pipe to transfer that heat. Then we're simply using more electricity for pumping, but they're using less money to pay for gas. So overall, the energy cost is down, even though the electric use is up a little bit. And this is called efficient electrification. So, so again, American Public Power has promoted this, and they are supporting it, and we're just really happy to work with them. We've gotten other awards and recognitions from them, so they're a very strong organization to be with. These are just some of the logos of us, our power supplier, Missouri River, and American Public Power Association. Those are the major players, and we have some subcontractors as well, but these are the major supporters and participants. As I mentioned, this is a copy of the letter of support from Missouri River Energy Services, and they do support this project, and it's they're all in if we can make this a go. So again, it helps them, it helps us. It's a good project. We're basically delaying. This helps delay building the next power plant. Little tiny bits. They're little small steps, but in short, an example is a residential home with a geothermal heat pump can actually reduce their power consumption. Instead of running 10 kilowatts at full peak, they're running maybe 7 or 8 kilowatts. You do that with enough houses, and that makes a difference after a while.
Dennis or Bill, just to jump in here, beyond the letter of support and the expressions of support for the various concepts, what does all in mean from MRS as a participant in the project, as well as
all in means
moral
money.
So. Oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah, and we don't know exactly what that level is yet.
Okay.
So we're working with them, and they're kind of putting pencil to paper, and we're trying to figure out some costs. We have a representative here from ONE Engineering, who is one of the subcontractors here, and they will give us some proposals, some basic ideas of what's going to happen. And once we have a better idea of the costs involved, then Missouri River will better be able to determine what kind of rebates or incentives they might wish to supply to us. That be correct?
Right. I mean, like Dennis said, all in means money. And Dennis is going to get into the concept of how we're looking at making this competitive with natural gas. Mm-hmm. But a key player is Missouri River Energy Services and their rebates for the internal equipment that Eventide and the developers would put in this building. If we don't get Missouri River's participation, which they have said they would, now we just have to figure out how much. But the project is less likely to happen if that doesn't take place. So they're looking at, and Dennis will get into the project costs. We've got $300,000 allocated. The deed grant is $125,000. And we're really hoping to get Missouri River Energy Services to participate like the deed grant is participating. So, I mean, we're talking, you know, $125,000 we'd like to get from Missouri River. But it may be more than that, maybe less than that, depending on how much rebate they can provide. But we're pushing them to be all in and be in for this project, because this project could be the only project that happens in the next 5 years. I mean, it's a really good project. It's an anchor project in downtown Moorhead, and so we're encouraging Missouri River to be all in, which we're still trying to figure out what the definition of that is.
Thank you. This is the initial project we're looking at. There's the Block E as in Eventide building above it. And you'll see there's a dashed line below it. And basically what we're trying to show you is that there's basically the external equipment, which is essentially the wells that would be drilled into the ground that are actually tapping into the earth. Then there's the inside equipment. So you have the window air conditioner on one side, and you have the ground source on the other side. And what we're looking at ultimately is to have where the utility will provide the geothermal wells, whether it's to this building or to other buildings if this project continues. But then the customers own the inside equipment. The biggest problem with geothermal technology to date really so far is not the technology itself, but it's the cost to get into it. And really the major cost there is the wells. So if we can somehow do the wells and expand, you know, draw out the payback on that to make it competitive with gas or even cheaper, then it's a lot more likely that customers can buy the indoor equipment that's fairly comparable to standard HVAC type equipment, heating and air conditioning, that they're more likely to use the geothermal technology. These wells have a life of 50 to 100 years, probably pushing more than 100-year end. So it's a long-term deal for the utility. And this is something that typically a business doesn't do because their return on investment is a much shorter window. But utilities, we think differently, we act differently. And this is one of those cases where if we don't do this, it probably won't get done by anybody. And so if we can do this within the scope of what Moorhead Public Service does, then I think this would be a good thing for everyone. So. The partnership, you know, we've talked a little bit about that between us and Missouri River. There's the deed grant, and something that is not really a monetary partner, but something where we're showing some collaboration with the city is if we can show that we are doing something with geothermal technology, which is technically a renewable energy technology, that this could possibly help the city with its green step designation. So we're there to help the city do that if it's possible here. Again, we're just highlighting here that there's really two segments of this, the external and the internal. We are looking then to finance and implement the external, the wells. And I think working with Missouri River, there might be some assistance and help, and that's where I think some help will come, where they're trying to maybe possibly provide an incentive to the customers for the indoor equipment. So if we can stretch out the payments on the wells, and Missouri River can help with incentives for the equipment, I think this is a really viable project. I really do.
Now, before you go past that slide, because this is a key slide, when I look at the recommendations, I mean, we're asking for the commission to approve three things. Number one is to accept the $125,000 grant from American Public Power Association, basically to study this concept. So that's part A. Part B is to approve the concept of capture the earth. And this is the concept of capture the earth, where number one, on the external equipment, which like Dennis mentioned is basically wells. And for this project, it's estimated that it's going to be like 66 wells or 90 wells.
Yeah.
So
We
there's,
updated that. It was 66, and we
okay,
updated
so
it.
66 to 90 wells, something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're going to figure out. You know, Moorhead Public Service would install and own that infrastructure. And that's like for the 8th and Main project, that could be a couple $100,000.
Right.
And then we would finance that over a period of 40 years. It's an asset that's going to last 100 years that we're going to finance over 40. Like Dennis mentioned, you know, a developer isn't going to do something like that. A utility looks at assets that way. And this asset has no moving parts. It has glycol solution on the inside, but it means basically pipes in the ground. And so we do pipes in the ground. That's concept, or that's part number one that helps to make it competitive with fossil fuel burning, you know, systems. Point number two is the internal equipment, which can be, it's a superior product, but it's also more expensive. And we had a long discussion today about how do you compare these apples and oranges, because the heat pump does have some benefits to it in itself, but it's more expensive, and that's where we're trying to get Missouri River Energy Services to provide rebates, because that efficient efficient electrification technology is something that is advantageous to Missouri River. They don't even know how advantageous it is yet, but it's an electric load that's much more efficient than, you know, just your standard electric baseboard heating, whatever, you know. So there's some advantages to that, and they haven't determined what rebate it should be or what the advantages are, but they're willing to step up and take a look at it and provide some research dollars to help us with this project. So, but one big part, and we're asking you to approve it for this project, is where Moorhead Public Service would own the wells, like 90 of them, right at 8th and Main, and we would provide a rate based on cost of service over, that would basically recover your investment over 40 years. Now that's a long time.
Bill, would you give a little bit more information, but just wells, what the process is, and or is that coming
Let me
up?
explain. A well, they would be spaced about 15 feet apart, center to center, and each well is about 200 or 300 feet deep, and it's basically a 5-inch pipe that has then another pipe inside of it. It's basically a 1-inch pipe that goes down and comes back up. It's basically a U-shaped pipe. And then it's filled with a clay to help with conduction. And that's all a well is. It's just a 5-inch pipe with a smaller pipe inside that goes down and back up.
So you're circulating water then?
It's a propylene glycol solution to avoid freezing. And it's food grade, so if there is a leak or something, we're not contaminating anything.
So basically what you're doing is when it's circulating, then it's dispersing heat and
Correct.
taking cool, or
Right.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dave?
Question?
Oh, Chris, I'm sorry.
So I'm picturing like a radiator. Does it work like that or not?
Yeah.
With
I mean,
circulation of,
Yeah, because I mean, basically, a radiator, you're bringing, you know, like a warm,
Right.
hot water into an element, and then it's radiating heat.
right, you're capturing that heat that it radiates again
Right.
before. Okay, all right, I
Yeah.
understand now.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So this is part B of the concept. And the reason why I'm emphasizing it is because we've got a tight timeline with the 8th and Main project, because they have to make a decision on their mechanical equipment. They've got their base case system basically spec'd out, which is a natural gas boilers and rooftop or in-the-wall air conditioners. And what we're basically coming to them saying is, if we do a capture the earth type concept, would you be willing to install heat pumps instead of natural gas and air, and regular air conditioners? And, so I mean, the timeline part of it is we're asking you to approve that so we can continue to investigate it and make a proposal to Eventide and the partners of this project and say, here's what we're willing to offer. And then part C is the engineers to study this project. And the project has another part to it, which is downtown Moorhead as well, but Dennis is going to get into that. So anyway, before we get off this slide, I just wanted you to understand we're going to ask you to approve this concept, especially for 8th and Main, and, expending the dollars to put pipes in the ground. So, and that would be next spring. Back to you, Dennis.
This slide basically is a good graphical representation of what efficient electrification is all about. This is a graph showing annual energy costs for a customer that include the gray bar is for lighting and appliances, red is for heating, blue is for cooling, and the orange is for water heat. So the ones that we're specifically concerned about are the red and the blue lines. On the far right, that's an example of an 80% efficient oil furnace, expensive to operate. And, you're talking over $6,000 a year for heating and cooling and other energy uses. But if you look in the far left, this is where we have a geothermal heat pump. And, you can see it's obvious that the heating and cooling costs are much lower because really all that you're spending money on at this point is a circulating pump. All the heat transfer comes from the earth. We're just pumping fluid is all that we're doing now. And so this is an example of where you still get the heating and cooling that you want, but look, your overall energy costs have gone way down. But yet, from the utility point of view, we've actually increased our energy use, our energy sales a little bit. So this is efficient electrification. It helps the customers, it helps the utility. Next slide is something that Bill alluded to where because these systems use less energy, we are able to have lower demands than we typically have. And because we buy all of our power from Missouri River Energy Services as well as WAPA, but we pay the demand and energy charges from Missouri River. So anything we can do to lower that peak is a good thing. And one of the things we're trying to determine with the geothermal heat pump systems is how well it distributes the electric load over the day. Are we having the sharp peaks like we do now with electric heaters, or does this geothermal technology level it out a little bit more so we don't have these sharp points? And that's part of the data that we're looking to collect on this project. So not only is it efficient electrification, but hopefully it's more gentle, for lack of a better term. Our budget is right now about $425,000. 125 of that will come from APPA. The other 300 is currently in the budget for 2018. This includes wells. This includes subcontractor costs. It's everything that we. It's producing some deliverables for APPA, which includes like a brochure. Something that would help other utilities to see what we've done, to see if we can help them with this information. It's just all what this project will take. Again, we're looking at recovering the well costs over 40 years, and they have a 100-year life. Here are the principal players. For lack of a better picture, I'm at the top there. And we have Mr. Schwant there, the second one down. Jeremiah Christensen from Overmiller Nelson Engineering. And then Geotechnical Connection, or Geo Connections from Brookings. the free energy solution, the free engineering solutions, is Brian will help with a lot of the reports. He actually was, the instigator of this project, and he brought it to Bill. And he has a lot of the ideas how to organize it, how to do the reports, and he really is going to be really the dominant driver on how this thing floats. The Obermiller Nelson Engineering, ONE, they will help us with system design, and they will also help us with a separate study that will determine if this sort of project can be expanded to either all of downtown, multiple buildings, the whole city. I mean, we're just trying to see if this is something that is really, a direction that the utility should be looking at heading. If it is such a good idea, is it executable? And so that's what they'll help us with. And that's part of what that $425,000 is for, so for these design and engineering studies. GeoConnections is a firm based out of Brookings, South Dakota. They are a well-regarded geotechnical company who have worked with a lot of the Bakken oil drillers, and they understand underground technology very well. And they're going to help us model some of our data. They're going to help us make sure that what we're doing is appropriate and working and is doing what it's supposed to be doing. So, I mean, we have some, between ONE and GeoConnections, we have some really, what I would call world-class experts in this. And so this will be, I think, a well-guided project. We're not just shooting from the hip on this. So let me summarize our key points here. We have this deed grant from APPA for $125,000 that we're asking you to approve. And if you approve it and we sign the document, then we'll start the process. And if you don't, then we'll just tell them thanks, but no thanks, and no love will be lost. It'll be fine. The second thing is that we'll be investigating the feasibility of us owning wells. Is this a good deal? Is this doable? And we're just trying not to bury anything here. We just want to make sure it works. The external stuff is expected to last 100 years and will be owned by the utility. We're looking to partner with Missouri River Energy Services as a power supplier to us. This project benefits them as well as us and our customers. That's really important to know that we aren't doing this if it doesn't benefit the customers as well. And then we're going to be trying to put together a lot of information for good reports, good analysis, and that's, a part of this project is the data analysis part. We want to make sure that we have a report and an understanding of what we're doing, and that's useful not only to us but other utilities. And probably then the last thing I want to stress then again is, we're working with Obermill, ONE Engineering, Free Engineering Solutions, and GeoConnections. Great help on this. They know what they're doing. And then the last point is just to reiterate that you are aware of the conflict that Brian is Bill's son. And it's interesting because whenever we have meetings, he always refers to him as Bill. Doesn't call him Dad, calls him Bill. So that's fine. So in summary, to reiterate what Bill has already mentioned, but these are what we're asking you to approve. A, to approve the APPA deed grant for $125,000. B is to approve this concept of capture the earth, including we're probably getting a logo for it, like capture the earth, capture the sun, capture the wind, that sort of thing. And then to approve that we go ahead and secure the services from ONE, Free Engineering Solutions, and GeoConnections. And that is my song and dance. Thank you.
Members, before we proceed with question and answer with our staff and so forth, Mr. Rewer, you're here representing the project. Do we have any time constraints as far as you're needing to be someplace else? I'm anxious to hear from the project as well, and either this would be a good time, or if while Dennis is up, we could have some conversation with Dennis. But I'm anxious to hear from the project representatives as well, to see how it is that we're cooperating, coinciding. If we have anything that we need to talk about, with you as well. So, however you'd like to proceed. If you'd like to visit with Dennis while he's up there, or we can ask John to come up and visit with us from the project perspective too. John?
I do have a number of questions here, so, and just to clarify, the reason I'm getting into such detail is I had calls with concerns regarding the conflict. We'll start with that here for it. So, I'm a little confused about the budget, because in your application that was submitted, the budget was $304,000. Now you're saying it's $425,000. Could you give an explanation why that is different than what your application is?
The way that I can best explain that is that when that budget was initially put together, we didn't quite have everything identified yet that we needed to do. But as the process moved on, and we just fine-tuned what we needed to do and what it cost to get there, that's what increased the budget, so.
But also, Bill had said earlier that the $300,000 was already in our budget, so that was determined several months ago.
Next year's budget.
Yes, but that budget was prepared several months ago, or worked on, and your application is different than what the budget was for, so why is that?
Well, I mean, the budget for the deed grant was done quite a few months ago, and then we revised it to be more accurate, like Dennis said.
When was the application then? Do you remember approximately?
The application was made in August.
August, I'm thinking,
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Because I think we were awarded, like the first week of October is when we were notified. And so, yeah, it was late August or September, sometime in that time frame. So.
Okay. The other thing, Dennis, you talked briefly about the city's, I guess, potential benefit.
The Green City
designation. So, is the council been reviewed of this, or they're aware of this, and anything as far as input from the city at this point, Chuck?
No, I haven't.
All right.
That's the same question I had.
All right. Okay. All righty.
I mean, how closely were we working with the city on this one?
You spoke briefly about the qualifications here of the people that are participating here. Are we required in any way, since we're talking about a $300,000 expenditure, to get competitive bids or proposals, just like we do with equipment or anything of that sort?
I would maybe give this to Bill, but my impression is that we are, when it comes to professional services, we have a predefined contracts for that. It's called the EDCJC, something like that. And these are what we can use, and these have been approved by legal counsel earlier for all professional services. And my impression is that we can go directly to a consultant and work with him directly with using this contract without taking bids.
And you spoke to the qualifications of the Auburn Nelsons as well as the GEO, but you didn't really clarify what the qualifications and expertise of the free engineering solutions are. Could you expand on that?
He is a young man, but he has a master's degree in electrical engineering and has, I guess, some experience with this, with a similar project in Horse. And so.
I'm sorry, similar project where?
In Horse, North Dakota.
Okay. All right.
He's working with some other people, and they're working on a project there that, and that's was sort of the genesis for this. They thought this was an interesting idea that might work here too.
So there really hasn't been a lot of these type of programs either in the state or region?
Well, and that's one of the reasons why the grant from APPA is so strong, is because there's so little information about this, but there is interest in it.
Okay.
We did find one other utility in Oklahoma that's doing essentially this exact same thing. It's a cooperative, and they're providing, they're owning all the piping on the outside of the buildings, and then they also provide a $3,200 per ton rebate, which is, of course, our starting point with Missouri River Energy Services, which is substantial and, basically makes it competitive with natural gas. So, I mean, that was nice to find someone else that's doing it.
I think there's just a couple more here for Tom's letter that he sent us was really not committal at all as far as dollar amounts or anything of that sort. That makes me somewhat nervous if we're relying on Missouri River to participate with incentives or without a specific range or even type of assistance, if you will. If they don't, I guess, come to the table with $125,000, is that going to create problems or issues for us?
The way I would envision that working is that by their December board meeting, which is December 14th, Missouri River Energy Services would have to commit to a dollar amount. I mentioned that $3,200 per ton.
Yep.
They're going to have to come up, I think, with a dollar amount per ton, and you heard this project is 90 tons, some incentive, and then they're going to basically give that to us, and then we're going to give it to the 8th and Main project and say, here's the dollars per ton that Missouri River is going to contribute toward your internal equipment. Can you make the project work? Are you interested in the project? Because they've really got to do a go, no-go at that point. After talking with them today, the project participants and the engineer from O&E, it was clear that I don't think Missouri River can provide a dollar amount because I just don't think that's gonna work, because you're not gonna know what it's associated with. But the way this other utility did is they said, we're gonna provide an incentive of this much per ton, nameplate rating, you can add up all the tons and so everybody knows what's gonna be provided. But that's what we would have to get by December 14th, and then we would, be able to provide that.
So is there a minimum bill that you're going to say that they're going to have to commit to make this project go, or don't you have that?
Well, like I mentioned before, I think Missouri River is looking at, they're actually looking at doing it not in a dollars per ton per se at this point. They were looking at just as a research project, and they were going to commit $125,000 toward the research project, and then basically give it to us to figure out how to use that. I think what I would work with them on is say, I know they're interested in about that amount, because they really were looking at just matching the deed grant, because APPA provided 125, MRES would commit to about that amount, but convert it to a per ton number, and then you just give it to the developers and say, if you can make the project work with this, then make it work with this. If you can't, then we'll move on to the next one.
Okay. All right. The final one then, as far as have you talked or thought about any way of getting the EDA involved with this as far as promoting this or using it as incentives for? I know you listed several businesses that currently have a project of interest in it, but if you haven't, that may be something to research, as well as thinking that we need to make sure we keep the city aware of this project, because it's significant with the development from downtown.
We're hoping that this is significant and that this would attract a lot of attention. Like, look at what Moorhead Public Service is doing. I mean, I intended it to have some shock and awe, qualities to it. And it does already, because if you own the piping equipment and finance it over 40 years, and you can get Missouri River to do a rebate, say, of, half of what this other company was doing, $3,200, so $1,600 per ton, I think you're actually going to be less on the capital cost of the equipment, and you're going to be less than natural gas on the capital equipment and less than natural gas on the operating. And with the current perception out there right now with heat pump equipment, you have to have that. And that's what Dennis and I are trying to convince Missouri River to do on the front end is we want to throw everything we can at this, starting with this 8th and Main project, so that we, get the attention of the EDA and others. Then project number 2 that pops up in downtown Moorhead that says, hey, is that available to us as well? Well, we know part 1 would be with Moorhead Public Service because we would have the concept where we own that piping and the wells. Number 2 is where we'd have to go back to MRES and say, you did it for this first one, we do it for another one. And they may have to go to their board and say, we need a budget adjustment. And we may as well. We may have to say, hey, we don't have this in our budget to do project number 2, but we're going to do it just like we did project number 1. So I'm hoping that there is excitement, but frankly, I think that this project will be project number 1, and it'll sit there as the only project for the next 5 years. Because I think it's that hard to convince entities to do this type of a project. I think in 10 years, we'll look like, man, look how far ahead of things they were. But I think for the next 5 years, it's going to be a lot of skepticism. Because I think, right now, we built two brand new schools in Moorhead, and we built a law enforcement center, and nobody even considered doing geothermal on any of them. So, that nobody is looking at this. So if we can do this 2-part concept with us and Missouri River, and that's why APPA is so interested in it, and we can capture the attention of, builders, contractors, et cetera, to look at this, then we've really got something. Whether that happens or not, I don't know. I don't know if that's going to happen. But, Dennis and I have learned a lot over the past few months. We presented to John Rewert today and last week on this. And I think we've got some imagination building that, hey, we're on to something here. It's a proven technology. It's just a different way of looking at it. And when we talked to ONE the first time, to Jeremiah Christensen, he asked, how are you guys doing this? How are you guys going to make it so that people are actually interested in this? And we said, well, we're going to have the utility. And at that time, we were looking at Missouri River maybe joining in on ownership of the pipes, because that is the most expensive part. And we said, we're looking at the utilities owning the pipes in the backyard or under the parking lot and financing it over 40 years in order to lower the price, and get rid of that large capital expense at the beginning. And Jeremiah Christensen from ONE said, leave it to the utilities to figure this problem out, because they haven't been able to figure it out. There's it's like Dennis said, large capital expenditure right off the bat and a 17-year payback. Well, what developer is going to do that? Now, utilities, we built a generator over here with a 17-year payback, but we know we're going to be around. So, are we willing to invest in pipes in the ground and we're talking a 40-year payback. So there's got to be some other benefits other than just making money for the utility, because a 40-year payback is unheard of. Only one other utility in the United States right now that we could find is doing that. The other benefits are what the deed study is going to try and figure out. And will there be a number 2? Maybe not. Maybe after the deed project we go, this dog just doesn't hunt. And we say it's a one-off project for the Eventide 8th and Main project, which still, it's a proven technology. It'll work. And it's going to be a great heating system. It's just the dog may not hunt. We may not have a number 2 project. So This is like research and development, right? This is a new program. We got to decide if we want to step up and do it. We've got APPA interested. We got MRES interested. They're going, hey, you guys might be onto something. So, was I accurate there, Dennis?
I couldn't have said it better.
So, I mean, but it's a good question. I mean, we do want others involved because I think to tackle this problem, like Jeremiah Christensen said, I mean, leave it to the utilities to figure this one out because it's a tough nut to crack. We've got to throw everything we can at it. It's like Ned Rector, and he might come up and talk too. He said today, he said, this is like the hardest time to get a project like this to work because natural gas prices are so low. If you can make it work now, you're probably going to be able to make it work into the future. And that's why I think in 10 years, we'll look pretty smart over here. We're trying different things, trying to be competitive. We want development in downtown Moorhead is what we're looking at. And this thing is sustainable too. I mean, we haven't even talked about that benefit, but it's a renewable energy project, just like capture the wind, capture the sun, capture the energy. This is just number 4 in our portfolio of renewable energy projects. This one is interesting. The other ones were smaller scale. This one's a big scale.
Well, I know you're crunching numbers like crazy. I sat in for a little while this morning for the conversation with the project, and we weren't at a point where we had a number that we could start to digest as far as what it was that the investment was going to need to be, especially identifying whether there's a gap or not. At this point, it might be really useful for us to hear from Mr. Rewer. To talk about the project from the standpoint of a potential first customer in this experiment or pilot project or whatever it is that we want to call it. John, thank you for being here.
Yeah, my pleasure.
I really appreciate you coming forward to visit with us and for your willingness to even consider at this late date in your project development this kind of a alteration to your plans.
Well, we have got a great project. We've got a complex ownership structure right now that includes us as a second floor condo owner at this point with an option 5 years down the road. So it's a group effort. It's folks at Five Stone or Eighth and Main, I think is their partnership group name for this, and Eventide. And our history goes back with Capture the Wind. My predecessor, I think, made sure we were part of that. So this would put us at 2 for 4. Not bad, but it'd be nice to have the trifecta. What would be the 4 for 4? But this is an interesting concept. I think we would be hopeful that the commission considers this and passes it to at least go the next step and explore what I think could still be a couple of barriers, at least as it relates to our project, and that's, I think, as indicated today, whether we've got the parking lot size to handle the wells. I think we're very close, if not okay with that, but we want to verify that. That might be a better question for the engineer. And then certainly closing the gap on that incremental capital piece. So what we have spec'd right now is your pretty standard natural gas burner. And we went back and forth. I don't know that we've got a Cadillac. I think we've got a strong Oldsmobile. So there's some nuances in there that I think still get hammered out when we're talking about what is that difference in capital expenditure. The risk for us is we had a little more time to think about it, but we're still very excited about it, is this commits us to an electrical source. I think that's kind of the plan. I mean, at least one outcome of it. And the other thing is that at some point the equipment will need to be replaced. So I think we all acknowledge it's not quite the same as pulling a crane up to the building and throwing another gas furnace on top of the building, but we still think it's worthwhile. So, I mean, for us, it certainly is a value add for the building. There's no getting around that. We think there's some smaller benefit in terms of at some point, whether it's us or our partners, marketing the 12 units above us. We think there's a lot of people out there looking for this kind of living that have the kind of the green quality to them, if you will, and we think that this energy source might appeal to people being responsible renters and consumers of power. So for us, we're happy to be in, even at this. I think our timing worked out, as our developer said, because our parking lot can't go in this fall. So that certain things are working in our favor to at least explore this further. And I just stop there and take questions.
Any questions? Sure.
You know, the question I have is, how many other communities, you mentioned Oklahoma, but have you looked at other communities and their experience and response from the people living in their town or their city?
I can't speak to that. I know I've mentioned to Bill and Dennis, we have had a couple of opportunities to build new care center and senior housing campuses. I know we really wanted this in our West Fargo campus, and I think the number was exactly a 16-year payback, and we just couldn't make sense of it before, your payback shows up about the time you're replacing the equipment, and we just couldn't get fired up about it at that point. So only with these kind of incentives could it work for us. And then, my only other experience would be a personal experience. I had an occasion to own a home that had this as a heating and cooling source, and I wished I could have continued, in my next place to have that, because it was really a very inexpensive, clean, and quiet heating and cooling source. So that's the two references that I have to the question. Maybe you want somebody with a little more technical expertise addressing that.
I think as part of the deed study, we would be investigating others that have done that.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually a number of communities in Canada that do this type of systems.
Well, and I think that was my question. How pervasive is this across the U.S.? Not very?
No, not very. I mean, Oklahoma actually is more concentrated on homes. So they do individual systems for homes, which I think is another thing that in the future we would look at doing the same concept for homes for the same reasons. Large capital costs can't justify it. But I do know that Canada has higher costs than we do as well. So they can justify the system a bit more. So that's where,
Isn't there a town in Iowa as well?
Yeah, there was a town in Iowa, but they got a pretty big Department of Energy grant to do it. So, but they do use it. It works. The technology works on an individual basis. I mean, one of the second part of the study is to look at downtown Moorhead and whether or not we could have a distribution system in downtown Moorhead that would, number one, be necessary. Number two, be advantageous. And
You mean a distribution system to multiple properties, buildings?
right.
Yep.
And is there advantages to that? Like Mr. Rewer mentioned the parking lot and whether or not there was enough room on the parking lot to heat their building. Well, if there's not enough room in the parking lot, you can go to a neighboring property. And you may have to compensate them for their heat energy that you're pulling out of the ground. But that's the community concept that may be, number one, necessary if you don't have enough room in one property and another property wants to be part of the project. But how do you technically do that? And we had a real interesting conversation with Ned about some different strategies on how to do that. So
Just for the record, Ned Rector is a mechanical engineer with ONE. So he was a representative for ONE at today's meeting. So just to put you on the hot seat there a little bit. So,
Yeah.
So keep talking about Ned. That's who we're talking about. So.
Well, and it might be good to have Ned come up and just talk about the concept from this is a proven technology. What we're looking at is a different financing mechanism. It's not a technical problem, it's an economic problem. And so we're looking at it from a different economic standpoint. And, part of it is to generate, it's to be renewable, it's to generate excitement downtown, it's to sell more efficient electric power, which is what Missouri River Energy Services is looking at. I mean, it benefits them more than it does us. The selling more power really doesn't aid us all that much, other than just we can spread out some costs of our distribution system. But it is a new electric load. And like Mr. Reaver said, you're hooked into us for a number of years after you make that decision. They've got to get comfortable that they want to do that, because they've got to get comfortable with heat pumps instead of natural gas furnaces or natural gas boilers. And so it's fortunate that it's a proven technology, because if Ned got up here, he'd go, it's not a problem. It works. It's fine. But the perception out there is, hey, this is something new. Is this going to work? Is this going to be really expensive when I need to take it out or replace it? And those are all the things that we're fighting against, and why we've got to have a shock and awe type mentality right off the bat. And that's why we're trying to get Missouri River Energy Services to be heavy on the front end with incentives. And our concept here at Moorhead Public Services is relatively, predictable and safe if you're comfortable with paying off a asset that will last 100 years over 40 years. Because, Eventide wasn't comfortable with that in West Fargo, even though it was a 16-year payback. But then the heating system on the inside of the building needs replacing about that time. Well, that's what they need to get comfortable with over here. We're just providing the pipes in the ground.
I think we need to recognize, though, too, yeah, it's kind of a two-way street. We've got to be comfortable with the commitment that we're making a 100-year investment and commitment to provide that service, to be on top of those wells really for 100 years. Whether we've created a utility, in a very small sense for a project, or if we're making a commitment to get into the geothermal business, to create a utility that isn't a singular project or a couple of properties. We're either jumping in or we're wiggling our toe, and even if we wiggle our toe, we're committed. If we do this one project, or if our vision is to move on into other things, bringing this technology to other projects that we don't even see on the horizon yet, but which, as we talk about downtown, and you've said downtown over and over again, and it's one of my great interests as well. If we're looking at how it is that this downtown is going to be unique and special and attractive and so forth, this might be one of the things that we do to make that happen. But I have to be comfortable too that what we're doing is initially we're making a commitment that somebody who's doing a multi-million-dollar project is depending on us for, and there's no turning back once they commit to where they're going with it.
For the first project, probably your worst case scenario as far as a program is, the first one works because of the incentives that we get from Missouri River and we've gotten from APPA, and your second one doesn't. If that's the worst case scenario, what you're probably going to have is you're going to have a partnership with Eventide, if they end up owning the building, a long-term partnership. You'll have a service contract that spells out all the deliverables that we will do, just like we would if we were the utility doing it all over the city, but we'll be doing it for that one project. And for the pipes in the ground, that's probably not a real big stretch for us to do that. We work with pipes in the ground, we dig up concrete, we do that kind of stuff as well, but you'd have just one project out there, and it would be the 8th and Main project. Hey, it was a good try, didn't work, but the heating system all works and everything, so that's not a problem. But that's the way I would look at that. And John Bolger and Aaron have reviewed that. We would have to have an easement under the parking lot with access to those wells, so if something did go out, and I've talked to somebody that said one of their wells went out after 25 years, they had to dig up the parking lot and repair it, or dig a new well, and that's what you have to do in 25 years. Well, we would have an easement, we'd have an agreement, we'd have the right to go in there and do that. We'd have to restore it back to the original, like we do everything else that we do in town. So that's the worst case scenario is you're doing it for one customer. best case scenario is it takes off, and in 10 years, you've got 6, 7, 8, 9, 12 of them out there.
How do you know which well to dig up? If a well goes out, how do you know which one?
You really want Ned to come up here? Because I'd love Ned to come up
That's
here.
getting really technical. But,
Just
we
out
can
of
do that
curiosity,
later.
why 90?
Yeah.
Why so many?
It all depends on the,
The heating and cooling load, each well is equivalent to about a ton of heating and cooling. It's kind of a measure of BTUs. It's like you buy a 2.5, 3-ton air conditioner for your home. Well, this building, for the square footage that it has, is about 90,000, 95,000 square feet, and so it needs about 90 wells. So.
Okay.
One of the things that I learned this morning in just sitting into the conversation with the contractor and the developer and so forth is that this building is complicated anyway in how it is that they intend to heat and cool the different uses, because this is a commercial building, ground level kind of retail commercial. Second level, it's a big office, for a company, and then we have residential uses on the third and fourth floors. And really different concepts for how it is that they're going to address the heating and cooling needs of those spaces. So, that turned it into an even more complex conversation when we start dealing with those zones and what it is that they're going to need to do. That's very different from what the forced air, natural gas system that they had in mind, was going to do. So we are, in some respects, imposing on these folks to really redesign. One of my concerns, personally, as a commissioner, is that we not get too much in the way, and that we match a timeline that's going to work with these folks, because they have a project to move forward with. They're in the ground. They're building. Thankfully, we've had a crappy November. And so they're not going to be paving. that was made clear. But moving forward, we can't be in the way of these folks as they're moving forward with their project. Other questions, concerns? Chuck.
Thanks, Dave. So I'm going to just ask a real simple question. So the 425,000, is that just for the study?
No. That includes the wells.
That includes the wells?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the interesting concept, and I think why APPA provided us with 125,000 was because we did have a project that very likely could take advantage of it. We put this pretty picture, right in the application and said, this is a flagship development in downtown Moorhead, and we're going to try and utilize that and talk the developers into installing this system. So part of the budget that we supplied for the deed grant was to put in wells, make that happen. That's really phase one, is this one building. Phase two is to look at a feasibility study for doing it all in downtown Moorhead. So
if you were going to do it for all of downtown Moorhead, would you incorporate some of the city staff into that? Because I imagine this is going to affect the city pretty heavily.
Yeah. We've got a couple of city staff members right here. We had a meeting lined up in Bob Z's office, but he is busy on flooding issues, so he canceled that. Otherwise, we had a meeting set up to talk about it, and we've got time. We'll end up talking about that. I mean, this is a study, probably. I mean, it's an interesting study because there's a very practical project within a study, and that is the geothermal at 8th and Main. But yeah, we definitely will be doing that because we got to decide if that's actually going to work. If you go online, look at Minot State University. My first two years of college was at Minot State University, and they have a geothermal system on their campus. They actually had an old coal-fired steam system, steam plant, that needed about $10 million worth of work. And they said, why are we spending $10 million on this when there's probably something better? What they got a grant from XL Energy, and they put in a geothermal system. And that geothermal system, if you look at the map, probably would look a lot like downtown Moorhead. So I think, you know, if you just want to see a map of what Moorhead could look like with a whole bunch of wells, you know, for heating, look at Mine State University. If you just Google it, geothermal Mine State University will come right up.
Bill, in the interest of moving forward with something here, you know, we're starting to chew up a lot of time. I think we have some work to do. We got some numbers to crunch yet. We aren't at a point where we have an agreement that we can move forward with this particular project. We do have a grant that we'd like to accept. You know, it's my suggestion that maybe we move forward with the acceptance of the grant that has been offered to us.
Just, if I may add, just to help you feel more comfortable about that, just
Yep.
because we accept the grant doesn't mean that they will just send us a check.
Yep.
Okay, this only becomes a billable type thing, so if we stretch it out and we learn out later that this isn't going to work, then we can just say, it just isn't going to work.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it's,
Well, and it's not the only potential project.
right.
You know, so my thought is that we at least, you know, take that step to say yes, and that we're identifying then that pilot that is going to work with us, without maybe tonight saying in a motion that we're accepting this and we're applying it to a project that we don't really have an agreement with. So, you know, the thought is we can move forward with most of your recommendation. We can continue our conversation with the project, and maybe by the 5th of December, we can come back and say, you know what, we worked this out. And then we can take that additional step to say, you know, this is where we're going to apply the work. You know, it's a thought.
Yeah, I mean, we can, I think there is time. I mean, you could actually hold off, like Dennis mentioned, on the deed grant. I mean, just because you accept that part of it doesn't mean we're going to, you know, be billing them right off the bat.
Right.
And we'll be doing a lot more work on this before December 4th. It's, you know, your December 4th meeting might get a little bit longer, but we might have more information for you. And if there's other concerns that come up in the meantime, you know, talk to Dennis or I, and we'll address those.
Well, Mr. General Manager, the paperwork says the General Manager respectfully requests the Commission to do this. So, Mr. General Manager, what would you prefer from this group tonight?
Well, the one, you know.
That we move on A, B, and C, or that we?
Well, I mean, I understand, you know, that Part B is probably the biggest concept that you got to get around. Whether or not you want to finance a 100-year asset over 40 years, that's a stretch there. Mm-hmm. On Part C, you got to be comfortable with the conflict. And I did hear John Regala saying he's gotten some calls. So I want to be sensitive to that one as well. But the Part C, if we do get approval, then there probably is a lot of work that could be done in the next 3.5 weeks to get ready to make a proposal to Eventide. And that's probably the one thing that would encourage me to say, approve this, and we'll report on our progress at the next meeting.
Discussion? Further suggestions?
Just a clarification, Bill, here. On section or A, you have it specifically designated for downtown Moorhead 8th and Main commercial project. Could we just strike that specific identification and just say resources to a geothermal system in downtown Moorhead? So it gives you a little bit more
flexibility, yep.
Well, possibilities if Eventide chooses not to pursue it or whatever the case may be. That gives us some additional alternatives to accept the grant but not tie it to that specific project.
Right, right.
Okay.
No, I think that's a good recommendation.
And also to clarify your comment, I think the questions that I asked clarified a lot of the concerns as far as the conflict. Certainly, we need to be aware of those and continue to monitor it so it doesn't create something down in the future. But at this point, I'm comfortable with the responses that I've gotten for my questions.
John, can I clarify A? You want to strike out after the word utility?
After the word system, geothermal system.
Well, you can do it that way, or you can say geothermal system at downtown Moorhead, period, and not have a specific location, because that's still the area that we're going to focus on is downtown
Sure.
Moorhead.
Yep.
So that would be.
Yeah, that's a good one because
Okay.
the grant does say downtown Moorhead as well.
Yep.
So,
Yep, okay.
Are we ready to take action? I'd be open to a motion.
I'll make a motion that we follow the general manager's recommendations with the noted change in item A, and to proceed with A, B, and C as proposed.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Everyone understand the motion? But for now, we're not going to designate a project. And we'll move forward then with A, B, and C as altered and presented. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Okay.
Bill, one comment additional to that.
yep.
I would encourage you to contact Tom as soon as possible and inform him of how we're going to pursue this, but it's critical for Missouri River to give us at least some specifics of what they are going to propose at their board meeting. I think they should have that. We could have that by the next meeting here. That would make me a lot more comfortable.
Sounds good.
And
And
that before the 14th.
I'll get a letter from him as well. And he actually may have some flexibility, because he does have research dollars. And so, I mean, he may just inform his board that here's what I did, because it was brought up at the last board meeting, so they're aware of it.
And I think that would be beneficial for even tonight too, so now they would know what they can anticipate to make some decisions going forward too.
Right.
Okay.
All right, John, again, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thanks, John.
Appreciate it.
Thanks,
I'm sure
Ned.
that we'll be hearing more from you and the group.
Thanks, Dennis.
Okay, Dennis, thank you very much. Okay, moving forward, item number 10, approve specifications and authorize advertisement for bids for the 21st Street 115 kV transmission line relocation project materials. I would rather imagine, and there he is.
There he is. yeah.
Travis has walked up to the podium. So, Travis, I'm sure that you're ready to present this.
Oh, yes. Travis Schmidt, Electrical Engineering Manager. What I have in front of you tonight is approve the specifications and advertisement for bid for 115 kV transmission materials or project materials. Basically, what I'm requesting or asking of the commission tonight is to approve the specifications so that we can go out and purchase the steel structures that we're going to place on the 21st Street grade separation project. We have to relocate the transmission line because of the grade separation project itself. These materials have a 12 to 16-week lead time, so we want to order them ahead of hiring a contractor, so we have them here because it does take about 4 months to get them here.
Refresh my memory on your timeline then, with hiring a contractor.
Sure.
and getting that
So plan is to, hopefully at the next meeting, if we've got our specifications prepared for that, we will go out for advertisement for the contractor at that point in time. Construction probably won't start till, there might be some construction over the winter months, we might be able to get the cages and the foundations in for those steel structures. But true construction probably won't start until probably late March, April timeframe, once the ground is thawed and we're able to do some more work there too. So we have to get the materials in. If we order now, or excuse me, if we approve the bids in December, early December, that gives us March timeframe till we get the
Is this in coordination then with the overall project timelines that have been
correct.
established?
Yep.
Yeah.
If we can get all this done by mid-May, end of May, we should be able to be ahead of the rest of the construction. We have to move the transmission line ahead of time because in phase one, there's a shoe fly or for them to build the 2 bridges for the railroad tracks, they've got to make a secondary route around that for one of the rail tracks.
Okay. Any additional questions for Travis on this? Cheryl, John, we're good?
Good.
Okay.
Perfect.
With his explanation and answers to those couple of questions, we ready to entertain a motion?
Sure. I move to approve the specifications and authorize advertisement for bids for the 21st Street transmission line relocation project materials.
I have a motion, a second?
Second.
Motion, a second to approve as stated. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. We have approval. Moving right along. Thank you, Travis. Number 12, item to approve professional services for MPS equipment storage building. Who is ready to talk about this one? Chris.
Chris Knudsen, Water Division Manager. I can just start broadly with this item. We're looking at storage as a result of the recent pending purchase of the Van Raden property, and basically kind of altering how both the Water Division and Electric Division stores equipment. With the pending purchase of that property, we're actually looking at moving all of the Electric Division equipment into a building called the Hive, which you'll remember was purchased about 4 years ago and currently maintains the Water Division equipment that we use. What we're actually proposing to do is move that Electric Division equipment into the Hive and then move the Water Division equipment into a storage building that's currently cold storage. So we currently use that building to store mostly wire and water distribution materials. The scope of this project is actually just to really insulate that cold storage building, add some heating, add some water and sewer services to that building, and then proceed with using it for warm storage for the Water Division. So just trying to kind of centralize both the equipment for the Water Division and Electric Division. With the recent completion of the Sanford Hospital and kind of a slowdown of construction projects, we wanted to get this out on the on the street.
Get blamed for all that stuff.
Yeah, no, other projects. Yeah,
Yeah.
There's
Whether it's sheetrock shortages or whatever.
yeah.
You guys have been picking on us for years.
We wanted to get it out on the street here in maybe December or January so that we can get some competitive bids for winter work.
Okay. Have you been authorized to speak for the electrical division on that? I just, I mean.
Not in an
I'm sitting back
official
there.
capacity,
They're
but
not nodding or anything, not in an official capacity. Okay.
Yeah.
All righty. Any questions for Chris on this?
Yep.
John?
Are we required to have an architect on every project we do?
not on every project we do. Typically, if the project is under 100,000 or we can prepare the specs ourselves, we would do that. This project is estimated at $300,000, so it's pretty significant, and it's got some other pieces to it, in that we're adding heating and water, sewer, et cetera. So it's enough of a complex scope that we want to go out and get specs developed from an architect. So,
Well, from the familiarity I have to that building, I would think that you would have any large contractor that you would choose, they would have staff to do that without having an architect. So I would like to see a little research done from bids from various contractors to see what they would propose before we have the costs associated with having an architect, because I think it's a pretty straightforward project there, and they would have staff on hand that they've worked with this type of building numerous times that could do what we need.
right,
Is what my thought would be.
We did get an estimate from a contractor on the project. The issue is that because it's over $100,000 threshold, we have to openly bid it. So, I mean, we could go get multiple quotes to further refine the estimate on the project. If that's what your desire is, we could certainly do that. However, we'd be asking the contractor to provide an estimate which we couldn't accept, because we'd essentially be asking, okay, what do you think it's going to cost? But we can't accept your bid because that bid is over $100,000. We're going to need to go out and bid it openly.
That's what I am thinking I'm asking for, that you would request bids with design of the project.
Okay, so you want us to get bids from other architects? Is that what
No,
you're?
other contractors.
To include design.
Almost like a
within the
design build.
contractor Proposal.
Design build type.
Right.
Because I don't think, just my thought here, I don't think a cost of $25,000 for architect is necessary to do what we want to do in that building. It would be a comment and a question. Therefore.
Yeah, it gets a little I mean, we could further investigate design build, but I mean, again, we're going to have to bid this project at some point, so we're going to have to pay the contractors to develop an estimate for the project, I think. And that's where it gets fuzzy for us because it kind of crosses the line into almost professional services, which is where we need approval from you to do it.
I guess I'll disagree with that, is that I would think at this point with the contractors and the need of business, they would be more than willing to give you design and a bid on the project. That's my personal thought.
Is our timeline so critical on this that that we couldn't do a little exploration of this as opposed to
We
moving
certainly
straight forward?
could. No, it's not critical. I mean, like to get it out early, but we could revisit it. Certainly, that's not an issue.
Bring it back December 5th?
John brings up, an interesting point on this. It may be that what we could do is just simply ask for proposals that include the design aspects of the work, within the actual contract, and leave it to the contractor to take care of those details.
But again, we'd have to openly bid it, so we can't just go to a contractor and say, what is it going to cost?
Right.
And we want you to provide the services. We can't really do design build on a project like this. Other frameworks in a commercial environment, you can do that. We can't really do that in a public environment.
Unless it is a design build proposal. Can't we ask for that from?
It gets a little tricky. I mean, we don't do those types of contracts very often. We can look into it, but we typically don't do those types of projects. They're design bid build projects. So I mean, we can do a little bit more diligence on the cost side, but I mean, I think at the end of the day, we're going to end up in the same place because we're going to have to do a design bid build project.
What's the pleasure of the board? Bill?
Well, I'm just thinking that there is a design build type solution to this where you basically bid it out in a design build fashion. You might even just give them this agenda item and say, this is what we want, but you got to bid it, like you said.
Yeah.
And we could check, John Bolger has some expertise in this area. I mean, we have done, we've hired a construction manager to do a project when bids came in way too high, before. That one was under 100,000 though. So I mean, it like Chris mentioned, it gets tricky when you're over 100,000 because we just want to make sure and comply with the law.
Right. And
but we can certainly
invest. Project for $300,000, you're going to have some significant contractors that will want a project like this and have the expertise to do what I'm proposing to do both.
Right.
Is to give you a design and then the bid, and then you can choose if that design is satisfactory to you and the bid is satisfactory. Right. And if it's not, then you...
And you might have a little bit of different design and, on each one.
The problem is laying the framework for the bidding, so the specification development, that's the issue, is that they all need to be bidding on the same thing. I can't just issue a proposal saying, design, build me something, when this contractor A might provide something different than contractor B. So, I mean, we can look into it, but again, I would just say that probably going to end up in the same place.
Mm-hmm.
Bill, Chris, why don't we bring it back on December 5th?
We'll talk about it because it probably is the project to take a look at this.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a little different way of looking at it than when we've looked at it before, but it might be the right project to do it on. Because, I mean, it is exactly what you see here. It's not that complicated.
Okay. Let's look at it in a couple of weeks. Great. All right. Thank you. Next item, number 15, to approve the 2018 commission meeting schedule. This one is a little different, and Bill and I had a conversation earlier in the week. If you'll notice, the calendar as proposed would have us meeting regularly on one Tuesday of the month. I have suggested that maybe we might want to revise that one. My concern was that if we only set aside one Tuesday afternoon out of a month, as I know my calendar starts to fill in, and there are other people that are involved in putting things on my calendar besides me. And so I'm a little uncomfortable with just having a calendar with one Tuesday a month, that maybe we ought to designate that principal meeting, and I think we can get a lot of our business done, like a lot of boards around town, and have a monthly meeting. But through the few years that I've been around here, we've done a lot of business twice a month, and so my thought is that maybe we revise what has been presented, and in addition to the first Tuesday of the month, that we either designate the third Tuesday as a meeting if necessary, or that we use that one as an opportunity to either visit facilities, to do planning, to continue to do the work that we do as a board, aside from being the board of directors and approving bills and things like that. So, that was my thought. I wanted to throw that out to you as we consider this schedule as staff have presented it. Casey wants to say something.
There is a planning commission meeting here on the first Tuesday of the month.
Oh, okay.
Whatever
Tuesday it
I do have a
was.
suggestion, Dave.
Yeah.
For meetings like that, something that's an idea is there's 4-5 Tuesdays of the month throughout the year. Those could be used for tours, things like that, if you want to do something like that. Because the third Tuesday is really handy because we're right between those two city council meetings. So that's handy, but that's just my thought, because the first Tuesday is difficult unless we were to have it at a different location.
Right.
It is, the planning commission is in here at 5 o'clock on the first Tuesday. I know that because I used to be the staff liaison, so I know they're here on the first Tuesdays.
And we've got time to look at this, if you want to think about it, because typically we do this at the last meeting of the year. So we're actually a month early on this one. The one meeting a month was an attempt to, just have one meeting a month.
Right.
Like Casey mentioned, there is a fifth Tuesday in 4 of the months in 2018.
Yeah.
And they're actually good months because they're like January, May, July, and October, I'm guessing. I'm pretty close.
They're always free because nobody uses them for anything else.
Well, I misspoke. And I guess I didn't really mean the first Tuesday. You have the third Tuesdays, and that's good. But it seems to me that we ought to be prepared to have that next meeting if we need. Like in this case, we want to come back in 2 weeks to look at a couple of important things. And I think we ought to be holding on the calendar, those additional dates. But Chris?
What was the rationale for moving to the second and fourth, moving from the second and fourth to the third? Just because it split the difference? Or?
No, well, the rationale is the council used to be the first and third, and we were the second and fourth, and then the council moved to the second and fourth Mondays, and you've heard it. They don't like that. Or you don't like that sometimes because of the timeline, we have to do a contingent approval of the commission, or, it goes to the council before it goes to the commission. Right. So we're trying to eliminate that by putting it right in between the two council meetings. And then, as it turns out, that's really the only Tuesday that's kind of clean, because the planning commission meets on the first one. We're trying to avoid the second and fourth ones. So third just kind of pops out there. And then the fifth one, that would at least get you 4 more meetings if you want to designate that as, or we can just put a if needed meeting in there and find a different location, do it on the first meeting, well, you probably want to have the first meeting of the month as your if needed meeting, and then have your official meeting here, because it's televised. But you could have your first meeting a month, at the plant. We've got conference rooms there, and that could be a more informal meeting. Or we were thinking about doing, some tours. Pactiv would like to have us come out and do a tour. Bush, the same thing, and we would reserve that for that first meeting. Or we can leave it second and fourth and do it just like we're doing this year. This, the second meeting of the month, the second Tuesday of the month is your official meeting per se, and then your fourth Tuesday of the month is kind of a planning meeting or a tour meeting or a education meeting. We can talk about demand rates.
Well, I'm all for having a business meeting where we get a lot done in one meeting as opposed to spreading out over two.
You kind of want to,
Like I said at the outset, though, I think it'd be good for us to be at least penciled into a second.
right. I understand, having it penciled in your calendar, so if we do need to have a meeting, we can have one. We can just make the second one an if-needed meeting. And then we just have to be comfortable with which week we like.
Can I retract what I said earlier? From what Bill just said, I like his idea with the first meeting, or a meeting out at dispatch or an informal meeting, or we have the tours. So we could do that first Tuesday where it is planning commission. That could be our informal meeting.
Someplace else.
And have it someplace else so we're not, so we can do those tours, we can do things like that. I don't know, Chuck, are you on the planning commission? You or Heidi? Okay. And then we could do that third Tuesday because that is still really nice between those two council meetings. That is just a really handy time period to have that commission meeting between those two council meetings. And I think the council would appreciate it as well.
We would.
Well, I tend to keep Tuesday afternoons open, so I don't have a real strong feeling about which Tuesday of the month. But folks, if you got ideas, John?
Well, I'm definitely opposed to having one meeting a week because of the, or a month rather, excuse me. Yeah. And because of that, of the time that I've been on this commission, I think we've had 2 times that it's been canceled because it wasn't needed. I think it's very important for the commission to get together on a regular basis to discuss issues, and if nothing else, afterwards, to get to know each other and have that opportunity, because frankly, I don't get a lot of opportunity to visit with the commissioners other than the meeting dates. So I think it's critical that we have that, still keep that opportunity. So my preference is definitely schedule 2 meetings, and if it's for strategic planning or if it's a plant visit or whatever the case may be, that can be decided as the calendar goes along. But just eliminate that is, I would be opposed to just eliminating the idea of once a month.
I think that supports even the idea, like our conversation tonight. We spent a good hour plus discussing something of really terrific importance, not only now but as we move forward. We had a customer that has an issue for us to spend some time on, and I think we're going to have to spend some time discussing that. So that's outside of the normal, the regimen of the business meeting where we're dealing with financials and so forth. If we can get that done one meeting a month, and then have that flexibility to take on these other things in the second meeting, terrific. That may say that we need to just stick with the second and fourth. And isn't that the pattern that we have now?
Yep.
Yeah. And the room is reserved somewhat continually for us to do that. So maybe we just stay with what we have.
Well, that's probably the big question while you're here is, do you want to stick with what you've got? Because there is a conflict with the council that comes up, a couple times a year where they complain, hey, why is this on our agenda and you guys haven't approved it yet?
Yeah.
And it's a timeline issue.
I think we deal with those as they come along.
Yeah, or you go with the third, and then you have your first be your as-needed meeting, and you have that somewhere else.
And we do have to have Wednesday meetings sometimes because of holidays, because we are right after the council. First and third is
We've lived with that over the years.
Yeah,
That's never been a crucial thing.
election.
And then you can think about it, and then we can talk about it next time, and maybe we'll put those 2 options together, an A and a B, and you guys can figure out which one you'd like. So we'll have
Want to wait, or
one.
you want to do something tonight, folks?
I'd like an A and a B.
An A and a B. Let's come back on the 5th and
That sounds
consider
good.
an A and a B.
Yep.
Okay. Enough of that one.
And maybe a C.
And maybe a C. And maybe a
For
C, Bill.
Casey, right?
And maybe a C, okay. Do I hear a D? No. Let's move on to approve the amended policy on bill payment approval. Nancy.
Nancy Lund, Administration and Finance Manager. So what we're looking at here or asking you to consider would be a slight change in our process for paying bills or accounts payable, whichever way you wish to term it. And there'd be two major reasons why we would be looking at that change. The first would be because we have one employee that handles processing bill payment for us and payroll. And it would help her efficiencies greatly to have those happen on rotating weeks, so that 1 week she would do bills, 1 week she would do payroll, and have those rotate efficiently for her. What happens right now in the current scenario where she's processing a list of bills to include in the commission packet every time is there's several probably several months out of the year where both of those tasks fall in the same week for her. So it becomes a real time crunch on her time. So that would be the primary reason why we'd be looking at rotating the bill payment process just slightly. The other would be to offer a greater customer service to our vendor and be more efficient in paying those invoices once they flow into our office. What wouldn't change would be the internal procedures that are in place already that actually gets that invoice into a list of bills, meaning that division managers are still having first approval on those invoices. It's going to our controller, and he's taking a look at that, making sure it's got some budget requirements and things like that. And I'm that final approval before those list of bills go into your packet. So those processes would still be in place. On weeks when you don't have two commission meetings, you've already given Bill the authority to be looking at those invoices also. So if we were to switch this, and if a list did not come to the commission before we actually write checks, we would still have that fourth review in place by Bill. So we'd be having just as many internal controls in place. And again, the biggest savings would be the efficiency for that employee that is processing both of those types of transactions for us.
Okay. Any questions for Nancy?
Nancy, did you say that Bill has the authority to approve bill paying at this point?
When there's a commission meeting that is canceled, Bill does have that bill paying authority. So he actually does that final review and before those checks go out, yes.
So if we are going to continue with 2 meetings a month, then we would not need to have that contingency in this proposal.
We would need that contingency if we were going to do alternating weeks where our accounting technician is going to, the list of bills might need to go out before the commission meeting, and we would still include those in the packet for the commission to review, but we would need that approval in there because it won't always match with your commission meeting dates.
But there'd be a meeting within a 30-day window for
there would be,
receipt
but
and payment.
Right,
Yeah.
there would be, but we would still have. I mean, the primary reason for doing it would be to levelize the workload of this one individual, so that she's not preparing a list of bills and processing payroll in the same week.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead.
So you're talking about compiling the list and not cutting the checks. Is there a difference for you folks, or?
Right now, we normally don't cut the checks until after the commission meeting. So tomorrow morning, we cut checks and mail those out. Okay. So we're doing that. Sometimes there's a 2-week gap in doing that, and sometimes there's a 3-week gap. Just as we talked about, prior, we talked about the 5th Tuesday. So whenever there's that 5th Tuesday, we end up not processing accounts payable for a 3-week period. And so we do run into that sometimes where we're not as timely as we would like to be. And then throughout the year, for the accounting technician, the tasks will vary. So some weeks out of the year, she has double duty 1 week and then a very slow week the next. So this would just levelize her workload.
Do we have within the policy with the general manager to approve bills in the absence of a meeting, do we have a policy, within that policy, do we require communication to to the commission of that
At their-
aspect being activated? You know, how,
At their next regularly scheduled meeting, right? A report.
Right, right. The list is still provided to you at the next regularly scheduled meeting, so you're still reviewing all the payments that were made. So the only difference is whether the check is cut before you've reviewed them or after you've reviewed them. You know, the services have still been incurred, the product has still been delivered and everything, you know, so that change is not monumental. It's just your actual final review of that list of payables.
John?
Well, I'm looking at your key issues at bullet point 3, and it basically is saying that by amending this policy, that is giving the general manager approval to pay bills. I have a concern that by making that shift, that you're moving away from the authority of the commission, and I think it's important that commission review bills and determine if they're approved to be paid or not. So I can understand the reorganization for internal employee benefits, but I don't feel comfortable with making an amendment to the policy that you're giving control of bill paying to the general manager, either before the fact or after the fact. I still believe that's a responsibility of the commission.
Understood, and we're just trying to be a little bit more efficient. And again, the bill has already been received, the product has been received,
But it's still
the
the
services
commission's
have been rendered.
responsibility, Nancy. It's our responsibility and it's our duty, and I feel pretty firmly that that's not something we want to move on to staff.
All right, understood from my perspective.
Yep.
Other questions, concerns?
I guess I don't see why the checks couldn't be cut and wait to mail them. I mean, that's what we do at the school district. The checks are there, the board, the commission, the board would approve them, and then they would go out in the next day's mail. I guess I don't understand why that process wouldn't solve the problem of equalizing the workload for your accounts payable person and satisfy John's request to review the bills before the checks are mailed. So I guess there's probably some reason, a good reason that this hasn't been done. I just don't understand why that can't happen.
Okay, that might be an alternative. As you know, many businesses pay bills on a weekly basis, and they just run AP every week, and that's how they do it. I was just wondering if City Council Liaison Hendrickson would like to comment on how the city approaches their bill payment process, if that differs from how we do that.
You know, to be honest, I'm not quite sure.
They got rid of the practice of approving bills probably a decade ago, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
Because they used to
it was
actually
before
approve our
me.
bills,
Yeah,
but they got rid of that. So
and I think the city manager, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so. I mean, we'd have to check on how that works, but
But it was
You know-
long before me.
yeah.
With that reminder now, I do think that they make that list of bills available in their offices for review so that they can be reviewed before they go out. They just don't actually, I mean, everybody knows when when the list is available for review, and they go ahead and make the payments, which gives everybody the chance, all the council members a chance to review that list if they choose to do so. But they probably have empowered that city manager to make those approvals.
Maybe we ought to back up and talk about that. You know, I mean, you know, this is a real departure, and what we're doing, rather than having a conversation about that kind of a bill approval process, you know, we're just kind of, you know, jumping ahead to segregating that process, you know, every other week and so forth, but we aren't really talking about this commission and bill figuring out a process of bill approval and payment that we are going to be comfortable with, that is actually the relationship between us and you.
Sure. And reporting, so bill payment and reporting.
Yep.
Because it could be approved by the general manager and we still provide a report, or it could be approved by the commission. And there might be a way to make it efficient, like Chris said, and still get your approval, because I don't have a problem with the commission approving it. Because it is interesting to look at all the bills and see where all the money is going. It's just, how do we make it as efficient as we can? And we don't like to, delay payment too terribly long, because there's issues with that as well. If it goes over a certain date, then we pay a late fee and that type of thing. So,
Chris's proposal would solve that efficiency process with our employee too, so that it could be something we'll take a look at and bring that.
that's the process that I'm familiar with, as far as, like Chris exactly said, that the checks were prepared and they're reviewed and they're signed off on. They can be mailed, they can be mailed that day. So that's, I think, a good, very good suggestion to look at.
So I think we can bring this one back, or, see if there's any revisions or no revision at all to this policy, and just bring it back. I mean, on these policies, this isn't unusual to talk about them for a while and then delay it till the next meeting, so this isn't a problem at all.
But if I can add one thing too, and I can get information on it, but it's never been an issue, the city council, so.
Yeah. I mean, we rarely have, any commissioners say, hey, why are we paying, Steenerson's lumber for plywood or something like that?
Why are we?
I mean, that rarely happens.
You want the best, you got to pay for it.
I shouldn't have picked that one, but,
Did we bid that?
Yes, I did. I signed off on it.
Well, I think we ought to come back. And we've deferred a couple things tonight, but,
we'll look at it.
Asking us to have one meeting a month and then turning right around and asking us to revise our bill paying policy, it may be that you're overloading us on changes in comfort zones for a little bit.
Yeah, I wrote that on the top here.
Yeah.
Change,
Change is hard, man.
On to the next policy, if you're ready, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
On committees of the commission.
I was about to call that up.
Yeah, it really isn't change. It's more clarifying what the chair does, how a committee should respond. All of the things that are in here are what the commission has talked about from time to time. It was just really to clarify committees of the commission and to comply with state law, because as has been opined by John Bolger, we have to be careful that we don't do an open meeting law violation.
Right.
So we're outlining the procedures. I don't know, Nancy, if I hit the high points?
You have, and I would call this more of an education process of what we have used the committees for, and then just defining going forward what we will do, and then making sure we're in compliance with that open meeting law. So no change, just information on here's how we've been doing it and putting that on paper.
Any questions, comments, suggestions? John?
At the last meeting, John said he was going to do some additional research about his interpretation of the open meeting law. I don't know if he had got a chance to do that or get back to you, Bill, on that sort of thing, because there was some question as far as how he was interpreting versus there were some other interpretations if we were not. And that was John's last comment to me, that he was going to look into it a little bit more and then get back to us.
Yeah, I don't know if Casey or Nancy have heard anything from John. I think last time I talked about that with him, he's pretty solid on his written opinion where, basically the ones that aren't in the bylaws are ad hoc committees, and as long as they're not considered standing committees, then, you don't have to have your open meeting designations for them. The one that is a standing committee that the next item, the bylaws one, resolves is the negotiating committee. Mm-hmm. So if it's in the bylaws like it is, it's a standing committee and it's got to be open it's got to be an open meeting.
Well, again, when John and I were discussing that, based on the topic of the meeting, it may or may not be. And that's what he was going to look into as far as, because there is some difference of opinion as far as if that has to be open or not. And that's where John said he need to get clarification and respond back to us if actually that was an issue,
Sure.
open meeting law or not.
He hasn't
So-
gotten back to me on that one, I don't know.
So we
The
should
last time
follow.
I've talked with him, the differentiation between the open and a closed meeting would be is if you're discussing strategies, those would be closed meetings. If you're actually negotiating with the other party, those would be open. But the strategy meetings, so when the commission meets as a group and does strategy, those would be closed.
I think we just need more, I don't know if whoever can just respond, make sure we understand what his interpretation of the meeting rule is.
Bill, what does our action or inaction on this portend for us?
Like
in the next
Nancy
couple
said, it's
weeks?
clarification. If we want to send this through John in the context of the open meeting law, which is, good,
Okay.
then we could certainly do that before we approve it.
Does this affect our efforts, our current or upcoming efforts in negotiations?
The next one, the bylaws one,
Bylaws
would,
would?
just like Nancy just outlined.
This policy wouldn't?
I mean, so our recommendation is to, change the bylaws as proposed. John Bolger had a couple of revisions based on our district heating conversation that we just had, making those changes as well. But he was basically okay with the bylaws, but that's because, it's a policy of the commission. So if the commission's comfortable with their policy, that's basically what the bylaws are. And Erin is here and has been prepped on the bylaws with John as well, so I'll let her.
That's why Erin's here. She's
Yeah.
been so quiet tonight.
Yeah. So if you got questions on that one, you can ask me, ask Erin. I mean, the big one is the one Nancy outlined, where if the commission, we would like to, we would recommend, or I would recommend approval of the bylaws in order to remove the negotiating committee from the requirement that they meet and negotiate. So,
Well, first things first. We're jumping ahead. What's our pleasure on the committee, on the policy on committees of the commission? We've had a chance to look that over in the homework. Are we ready to approve this as it's been presented? Bylaws is next.
I don't have a problem with it.
Do I have a motion?
There was one section here I'm trying to find that I just wanted to make clarification, but I
Okay.
can't see.
Okay, no rush. This is kind of important, so let's get it right. Particularly on open meetings. I'm fairly sensitive to that. I think we need to be very sensitive to that. But the only standing committee that we seem to have, although its work is between August and December every year, is budget.
right. And that one, even, we've kind of had a change in how we look at that based on our conversations with John Bolger.
Yeah, what we would plan to do with the budget committee is once the budget is approved in December, then that committee assignment is over. If we needed to have people work with us on a financial type issue or something earlier in the year or January or after, it would be the commission president's right to appoint somebody to deal with that short-term issue. So we tried to do the ad hoc committees, short-term, define what they are, instead of having that budget committee serve throughout the whole calendar year.
Okay. And just to be clear, this is not our attempt to sidestep anything that is required by Minnesota statute.
Correct. We're just
Basically, we're going to
defining,
operate with ad hocs.
Right.
Because that's really what we do.
right, we're defining what we're going to use those committees for.
Yep.
I did find the question that I have.
John?
In section 9, that section is entirely struck from the bylaws. So I did not see anywhere where it said how or what we're going to do with the negotiations, if it's going to be appointed committee or how that's going to happen. And I don't know if that needs to be a part of this then, because if that's not going to be there at all, unless I certainly could have missed it, Bill, here. And that's, it basically, the president shall annually appoint 2 members of the commission here for it. So if we're going to strike that, we should have something as far as how we should conduct business in the, and I don't know if that's been decided yet, or are you making a recommendation here to us tonight to replace that section? And
Well,
it just says, it refers to compensation to all employees, but it doesn't talk about the labor negotiations.
Right. I mean, the policy that you're looking at right now on committees really could establish a negotiating committee. So the president could establish a negotiating committee just like he would appoint a budget committee.
What section are you referring to?
Well, the policy under, agenda item number 17. So the policy on committees would allow the president, and basically describes how he would do that, yeah, number 17.
As with other committees, then we would be appointing a temporary committee.
Wouldn't give any, special consideration to the negotiating committee, just another committee of the commission. And that's going to help you, I believe, is what John Bolger is thinking on the open meeting law. Because just like Nancy mentioned on the budget committee, as soon as the negotiations are over, the budget committee disbands and it's over. It's not a standing committee. But if it's in your bylaws, the way it's, listed here, annually appoint 2 members as the negotiating committee, you're going to have a tough time not convincing anyone that that's not a standing committee. So really this policy that you're looking at, approving would be, would help in the replacement and clarifying how you do committees. It's just that the president can appoint whatever committee that he feels necessary at the time. I mean, the first paragraph of the background, John, I think kind of answers the question. It's been the practice of the commission or the commission president to appoint members of the commission to a committee to assist the commission in doing its job by preparing policy alternatives and implications for commission deliberation. Examples of the committees that have been appointed in the past include the Budget Committee, Human Resource Committee, and Service Territory Committee.
So do we need to add labor negotiations?
Well, it really is the, it's kind of like the HR committee, because I mean, that was an attempt to soften that, not have it be labor negotiations. And I think President Dave was looking at, like a workforce committee. That would just be a little different name. I don't know if that makes it better or worse.
In the past, HR didn't negotiate the labor.
It was always the same, but it was always the same people. So, I mean, you still had the negotiating committee and the HR committee were the same people. So we didn't, so I mean, it's 2 different committees.
I guess I'd just defer then to Dave as far as.
I believe you're on number 17 yet.
Yeah, we are on number 17. My thought here was whether we should be, flipping the order on the agenda. It seems like the policy on the committees is being somewhat driven by our concerns about what the bylaws say. While we have approved the order of the agenda, if the members don't mind, let's move on to the bylaws conversation, and then we'll deal with the committee policy once we've gotten our heads clear on what our bylaws are directing us to do. Because I think, actually, that's helping us then to clearly establish policy once we understand our bylaws. So If that's all right with you all, why don't we open our conversation about the bylaws? Rather than jump around, let's come back to section 9 here in a little bit. Aaron, you're here. Do we need any pre-commentary from you, or do we just jump into what's read and stricken and things like that?
I think most of the changes that you see are going to be pretty self-explanatory. So if you just want us to start.
I would open it up for your comments and conversation here. A lot of it is really just a lot of editing and language and such. It really does start getting into the meat there at the bottom of page 3 with section 9. My thought there is, especially if we're not wanting to appoint permanent committees that do get us into concerns about open meetings, and that might be establishing too much of a specific ongoing committee presence. We have also talked about changing the structure of that negotiating group, but we haven't really arrived at what we want that to look like. Is it staff? Is it our general manager and staff? Do we want to continue the process of having a commissioner involved at the table with that? We've really not concluded that. We've thrown around a lot of ideas.
Dave.
Whoop. Oh, that's right. That's right. This was tabled last meeting, wasn't it? Okay, well, I've gone too far, but, thanks for sticking your hand up in the air. Was your arm getting tired?
No, I was only up for a little bit.
Oh, okay. Well, may I have a motion to remove this item from the table?
Sorry.
Please.
I'll make a motion. A second.
I've got a motion and a second to remove this item from the table. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Nobody's opposed. Okay. We have removed this from the table. Now we can talk about it. You're just a pain in the neck. You really are. But thank you for keeping us legal. So, all righty, back to the discussion of bylaws. How do we want to move forward with our negotiations? Past practices being what they were, we would use the committee of the commission was at the table.
I think this would be a good topic for a closed session if we want to talk about strategies for union negotiations. And you, Aaron, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe we would be allowed to close to have that discussion.
Even to talk about the structure of
Yes.
Of who? Okay.
Yes.
Is that true? Okay. Well, we could do that.
Yes.
Save this item for closed. The rest of the bylaws conversation, though, we can certainly hold right here.
But we can't approve the bylaws if we don't have the answer to that question.
Well, that's true, yeah. What's your pleasure, folks? We do have an item on the agenda to appropriately close because we do have some negotiation strategies to cover.
You will have a limited discussion on just that section.
Yep. Yeah. So, is that what this is about?
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
we do that now, or what's?
I have a question here.
Okay.
Is staff ready to propose a method to go forward with the change in the labor committee? I'm trying to pose that as that we don't get into topics where we can't, because if we're proposing to eliminate that committee as far as what we've done in the past, which was negotiations, is staff in a position to make a recommendation of how that should be replaced?
Maybe I won't even answer that question yet. I'll just answer, or I'll kind of talk about Section 9 just for a moment, the way it's proposed. And it's proposed to strike it pretty much in its entirety, although retain that the commission sets all the salaries for the utility. what it's talking about here is, in your bylaws, that you will have a negotiating committee. If you strike this, Dave can, with his authority right now, appoint a negotiating committee that can do exactly the same thing that it says right here. But by having it in the bylaws, you're going to have negotiations in open, which is what we don't want to have. So the only reason that we're proposing to strike this is so that we can avoid having to negotiate in the open if the commission wants to have the committee in the meeting. If the committee wants to be in the meetings, you don't want to have a standing committee, which is what this is. So I think you can strike number 9, approve that right now. You can go through the process over the next few months of negotiating. You can decide, some other time, whether or not you want to actually be in the negotiations or not. But you can't do it and not have an open meeting if you don't strike these words. So the merits of being in the meetings or not can be decided later. And, Dave could appoint a negotiating committee right after we're done with this, or you could do it right now.
Okay. Help me locate that section that you're saying.
Section 9, right at the bottom of page 3.
Yep, I saw that one, but you said there's a provision in here.
One more page, one more.
Top of the page, next page.
That's the commissioner shall appoint compensation.
Yeah, shall set compensation of all employees.
Right.
Are you talking about committees?
No.
Or
I may have
or the
misunderstood you. No, I thought what you said is that if we strike 9 from this, that there's a provision in this to have the president or chairperson to establish committees. Isn't that what you had said? And that's what I'm looking for. Where is that, and not in the bylaws, or is that in policy then?
Let me look here.
I think that the policy on committees of the commission is broad enough that it would allow the president to appoint that committee.
And that's what I'm looking for. Where is that in this?
Well, it doesn't, all this includes is examples of committees. It would give the president the authority to appoint any committee he so choose. So it doesn't specifically include it, but it doesn't exclude it.
Right, but that's what I'm asking, Nancy. Where are you seeing that in? It's in the policies.
In the policy on committees, yep.
All right, okay.
It's in the second paragraph of the policy on committees, in the background section of that policy. So if we go back again to item number
17.
17, yeah.
And I apologize, that's where I'm
Yep.
being confused between the policy and the bylaws as far as what are we, I just want to make sure I understand if we're talking about a policy or a bylaw here for it, so.
Yeah, and probably the distinction, the bylaws are a list of policies. Really, they take a higher number of commissioners to approve them. It takes a majority of the full commission to approve the bylaws. It only takes a majority of whoever's present to approve a policy. So, what I think you're trying to find, which isn't in the current bylaws but easily could be put in, would be the first sentence of that policy on committees that we have under item number 17. And it just says, the policy of the commission is to allow the commission president to appoint commission members to committees of the commission. And that's what you're looking for in the bylaws.
Right.
It's not there, but you could put that in, in a section of the bylaws, and it would be just fine. And then it's just harder to change, but really, most everything is unanimous anyway. So if you're comfortable, if you are more comfortable having that designation in the bylaws, put it in the bylaws. We're just saying, we're proposing it in a policy, but it can be in the bylaws as well. Isn't that right? Aaron's nodding yes. So, and I'm not sure, that would be the right section, because I'm not sure where it talks about the president in the bylaws. I'd have to look here a second.
Yeah, it seems that the bylaws ought to enable that policy on committees somehow, and we're not finding the language within the bylaws that enable that policy. Am I clear? It's almost like the policy is more driving the bylaws than the bylaws is driving the policy. So we need to add that.
Makes sense.
Do you want to add that to the bylaws?
Well, I think we probably do.
And that would be under.
Because it's not clear within the bylaws, and to me, the bylaws really ought to be driving that.
It's
I think
probably,
John's got a good point, we can't find it in the bylaws, but we're finding it in a policy that we've approved down the road.
it's probably under Article 2 where it outlines what, what the meetings will consist of, what the president is authorized to do.
Yep.
I said 2.
Article 2.
Article 2. Are you thinking Article 3?
Boy, this is some kind of fascinating television viewing, isn't it? Wake up. The nitty-gritty of governance. Well, I'm sure council can find the appropriate section for us to add this. And
Yeah.
Yeah, it would really, Article 2 or 3, you could
Either one.
put it on.
Yep.
And it would just be that statement that I just read,
Yep.
basically just giving the commission president the authority to appoint committees. And then this policy here would just outline in further detail the policy on why you do committees. But then that's not in the bylaws, because generally you don't make the bylaws that long. So this is just further interpretation of your policy on committees.
We are on item 18.
Yep.
If we are going to accept the motion, could we accept the changes that have been submitted to us by council with the addition of the statement that Bill read in the appropriate section that it would fit within the bylaws?
Contingent on that, yeah.
Attorney's
That
review.
completion of language and review.
Right.
Yeah.
So is
That
that,
almost sounds like a motion, but
I'm ready.
you got that one?
I'll paraphrase it into the
Okay.
right
do we,
motion, and you can approve the minutes with it if
Okay.
you agree.
other than the language and various updatings and so forth, do we have any other issues, concerns about the bylaws as revised now?
And the
So
only
it
other,
did sound like a motion.
Bill, you
Yeah.
have the sentence that
I do,
you want
yep.
to put in there, so you'll provide that to me. I'll put it in the minutes, and then you guys can
Okay,
review
yeah.
it in the minutes.
Yep.
Bill, would you just read that again?
I heard what he, go ahead.
yeah.
Was that a motion?
Okay.
John?
I just asked Bill to clarify the sentence that,
Okay.
Well, and you can write it down if you want to. The commission shall allow the commission chairperson or chair.
This is, we changed all that
chairperson,
stuff, yeah.
to appoint commission members to committees of the commission. Simply that.
Good?
yeah, straight
Good.
and simple. Yep.
Good with everybody? Straightforward, simple, okay. With that, I think we have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. Any further discussion? Going once, going twice. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay. Motion is passed.
Go back to
Go back to 17. Yep. Go back to 17.
And that actually.
Which is to approve the policy on committees of the commission. Any need for further discussion of that, or are we satisfied with the content there?
Just an educational moment from my standpoint. I mean, adding that sentence in the bylaws is a good idea, and then this further clarifies it in a policy.
Okay.
And, then we take it from there and further clarify it with what we propose or whatever. So I think it's good.
That's kind of where I was going with, the bylaws ought to enable this. Okay. Folks, are we good with this?
I'm good.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve policy on committees of the commission.
Okay, Cheryl made a motion. Any second? Got a second? Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Motion is passed. Now, I think we do have some business to attend to in closed session, do we, tonight, or?
If you want an update on the negotiations, which I don't have a lot.
Okay, shall we wait till the 5th?
Yeah, I'm fine waiting till the 5th.
Okay. You all good with waiting till the 5th? Sure. Okay, all right. Then, I guess, do we have a meeting on the 28th?
Yeah, we just basically made an if-needed meeting, and we cleared the schedule and put it all on the 5th. So we don't really have, unless you've got a reason to talk more about geothermal, we don't even.
I don't want to talk about that again for a couple of weeks.
How about sludge?
Sludge. Well, can't do that without Ralph here.
But if you do think of something, I mean, it is a scheduled meeting, and Dave Anderson can make it scheduled, so.
You guys have given me so much power. I can do whatever I please.
Well, this would be a typical fifth needed meeting, and so if we decided we want to do a tour or something like that, this is always scheduled.
Okay. Well, right now, we are fully expecting and will have a meeting on the 5th of December. That's also the evening that we have a social with the city council.
So and you'll get an invitation because that needs to go out. You'll get that in the next couple of days. But on December 5th, the city manager, Chris Volkers, and I are arranging a social after our commission meeting.
Right.
So our commission meeting's from 4:30 to hopefully 5:30, because at 5:30 we're going to invite the council to meet us right after our meeting and just have a veggie snack type thing, hors d'oeuvres, and just socialize. No agenda, just a chance to meet and greet and talk to the council.
At the council.
Pardon me, at the Yumcomp Center, yep. Because there's a planning commission here, so that's why we're not having it here.
All right.
Bill, on the 28th, Pactiv has invited the commission to do a tour of Pactiv. I don't know if that would fit at this point, but if there's an interest here for the commission or staff, and that may not fit for them, but
we can
they want us to come out there, so that might be just a thought to discuss here to see if there's not a regular meeting that might be.
Yep, we can try and arrange that, and we'll get back to you on that. Could do that.
Well, then let's keep an open mind for the 28th.
Okay.
That's 2 weeks out. We'll have meetings in 2 weeks in a row.
Oh, yeah, that's right, because
That would be
December
2 weeks
5th
in a
is
row.
the next week, so.
So we're bunching them in there. But then for the rest of December, I think we're done.
Right, right.
Okay. A couple of other meeting notices there, too. The APPA Legislative Rally is actually kind of coming up on the calendar. It's in February. I've attended several times now. It's worthwhile, something that you other commissioners may want to consider. It's
Very educational.
It's very educational, pretty enlightening. A trip to DC, which, for some people that's exciting. For other people, I don't want to do that anymore. But anyway, so keep that in mind. Any other business, folks, before we adjourn?
Good meeting.
I would entertain a motion to adjourn then.
I'll make that motion.
Second?
Second.
There's the second. There's the third. We are adjourned. Thank you.